You know, the global economy has this sort of hidden immune system. It's this incredibly sophisticated, powerful mechanism that's designed to kick in when its lifeblood, oil, is suddenly threatened. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see what happens when that system is activated.
So just imagine for a second, what happens if one of the world's most critical oil arteries is just severed? A key shipping lane that carries a huge chunk of the world's oil just slams shut. This isn't some crazy hypothetical. This is the exact scenario that global powers have been planning for decades.
And this is the trigger, the Strait of Hormuz. It's one of those critical choke points. So when geopolitical tensions flare up, and it effectively closes, a switch is flipped. You'd think panic would set in, prices would go through the roof, and economies would just grind to a halt. But they don't. Because a plan is immediately set in motion.
Now, in those first few hours and days, the world is absolutely on edge. Markets are teetering. The goal isn't just about getting oil moving again, it's about preventing a complete and total global economic catastrophe.
So how do you calm a market that's on the verge of panic? You do it with an overwhelming show of force. In what becomes the largest coordinated deployment in history, 412 million barrels of crude oil and other products are released onto the global market. I mean, that is just an absolutely staggering number.
And the organization pulling the strings on this massive intervention, that would be the International Energy Agency, or the IEA. These guys were born out of the 1973 oil crisis, and their whole reason for being is right there in the name, to be the world's coordinated first responder for any major energy emergency.
Now here's what's so interesting. That colossal release of oil wasn't some frantic last-minute decision made in a smoke-filled room, no. It was the activation of a highly rehearsed, meticulously planned emergency system. So let's dive into how it actually works. The oil itself, all 412 million barrels of it, comes from what are basically the world's insurance policies, the Strategic Petroleum Reserves. These are just massive stockpiles of crude oil that IEA member countries hold specifically for a crisis like this. You can think of them as these giant underground bank vaults, but instead of being filled with gold, they're filled with oil.
Okay, so you've got these huge vaults filled with oil. How do you actually get it out of the ground and onto the market? Well, it's not as simple as just turning a key. It's actually a surprisingly complex and varied process. So here's the deal. All IEA members have to hold enough emergency oil to cover 90 days of their net imports. But how they do it can differ. Some governments, they just own the oil directly. Simple enough. Others create a special agency just to manage the stockpile. And then some countries have this really interesting approach where they actually require private oil companies to hold extra stock that can only be touched in an emergency with the government's permission. It's this hybrid system that's built for flexibility. And the release itself follows a super strict legal playbook. It's not chaos, it's procedure. So in the US, for instance, it has to start with the president officially declaring a severe energy supply disruption. But then, and this is the most important part, all 32 IEA member countries have to unanimously agree to act together. This isn't one country going it alone. It's a global, synchronized move designed to have the biggest possible impact on the market. You know, a system this incredible didn't just pop up overnight. It was built piece by piece, over nearly half a century of intense planning, constant practice, and learning from the crises of the past. And this quote, this just perfectly captures the mindset behind it all. It's all about scenario planning. It's a way of thinking that really has its roots in military strategy. You prepare for multiple different outcomes instead of just betting on one forecast. The idea is to have your plan ready to go before the crisis actually hits. And you can actually see this evolution right here. The shock of the 73 oil crisis directly leads to the IEA being created in 74. But the real game changer, in my opinion, came in 2002. That's when they started running these regular, full-scale emergency drills, basically wargaming these exact scenarios. And it's all that practice that allows for such a fast, effective response when a real crisis finally unfolds. And, releasing oil from the reserves is just one tool in the playbook. It's the biggest one for sure, but the IEA can also coordinate campaigns to restrain demand, asking the public to drive less. They can encourage fuel switching, maybe getting power plants to burn natural gas instead of oil, and they can even call for a surge in production from countries that have spare capacity. It's a multi-pronged attack. Okay, so we've got this incredibly effective system designed to guarantee the flow of oil. But its very existence brings up a profound and frankly really difficult question for our time.
because you've got these two powerful forces pulling in opposite directions. On one hand, there's the immediate need to respond to a crisis. You absolutely have to stabilize markets and keep the lights on to avoid economic chaos. But on the other hand, you have the long-term climate imperative, which calls for a managed, planned transition away from the very fossil fuels the system is designed to protect. These two goals are in direct conflict.
And that leaves us with this incredible paradox. We have spent 50 years perfecting a global system to guarantee our access to oil, and we've done it at the exact moment in history that we've scientifically and politically agreed that we have to move away from it. Which brings us to this final, really crucial question. The principles that built this oil security system, things like global coordination, long-term planning, collective action, can those be repurposed? Can the same system that guarantees the flow of oil today help us manage an orderly transition to a future without it? That right there is the challenge ahead of us.